Hello, and welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and I'm a congenital amputee of the right hand. In this show, I will interview other amputees and allow them to tell you their incredible life stories. I'll also feature family members of amputees and others who support the amputee community, all in an effort to discuss the challenges and triumphs of those living with limb loss. So stick around and listen to inspirational stories and find out why we say, We're Not Stumped. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today I welcome Chris Rodriguez to the show. Chris has an extensive history of advocating alongside of and on behalf of individuals with disabilities, and this is on the local, state, and national levels. His passion for advocating comes from his experiences as the younger sibling to a person with disabilities. We're going to learn more about Chris today and his path to becoming the CEO of Ability360, along with the great things Ability360 does for the community. But first of all, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, Mike. I'm really excited to talk about all the incredible and diverse supports and services that Ability360 provides to the disability community here in the greater Phoenix area.
There is so much that we're going to be able to talk about today. We always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. So I'd like the listeners to learn a little bit more about you, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So as you mentioned, I appreciate the intro there. Chris Rodriguez, I've been the president and CEO of Ability360 for the past 3 years, but I've really spent my entire professional career in the disability sphere, working for numerous different types of nonprofits, representing the best interests of folks with disabilities. I got started down that path, actually, as you mentioned, as a result of being the younger brother to my brother TJ, who's an individual with fairly significant intellectual and developmental disabilities. I grew up in kind of a small town outside of Houston, Texas, and growing up with a sibling with disabilities put me at an interesting vantage point to kind of witness some of the unfortunate barriers and challenges that my parents faced raising a child with disabilities, and seeing how those challenges and barriers kind of evolved as my brother got older. So kind of witnessing those and kind of having a natural inclination for policy and law, I just thought, wow, why not marry two of my, passions? One, helping individuals with disabilities be more independent, and two, my interest in policy. So, I went off to school, studied political science, studied from a scholastic and scholarly perspective, disability studies, and then spent most of my time actually doing lobbying and legislative advocacy, both on the state level and on the federal level, prior to having the great opportunity to come out here and be part of Ability360. So, it's a passion of love and commitment and understanding. I just feel really privileged to be able to wake up every day and do something that I really care about.
What were some of the challenges, the early challenges that you can remember that your brother and your parents were facing that you're advocating for now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I'm not going to rag on the state of Texas. It is where I'm from, but Texas is not known, unfortunately, for their heightened supports and services of people with disabilities. And you have to understand, this is back in the 80s as well. A lot of good has happened since there as a result of some really strong disability advocates. But, everything from fighting for special education, different supports within our public school that my brother wasn't being provided, despite the fact that he was entitled to those things. My parents had to be their own advocates, had to be an advocate on behalf of my brother, oftentimes in situations that were very intimidating. After that, looking for different types of recreational opportunities. It was unfortunate. We both kind of grew up being active, but we didn't have a place like Ability360 that was really inclusive for a lot of recreational opportunities. So my parents would have to take my brother to a disability specific type of recreation program, and then I'd go off and do my sports somewhere else and things like that. And, just finding places that just accepted my brother in an inclusive environment was very, very difficult. And then, another big issue or challenge that so many folks face is just at the end of that high school experience, what happens then? What kind of supports and services are out there? Has that school really prepared that individual for education opportunities like employment? And so many times, especially back then, this is 20 years ago, plus 30 years ago, the expectations of individuals with disabilities to go into the workforce just didn't exist, and therefore they didn't see a purpose in really preparing people with disabilities for employment. Thankfully, a lot of that has progressed at least somewhat. We still have a lot of work to do, but those are some of the challenges that my brother faced and my family faced. Some of the things that I witnessed and just thought, maybe if I try hard enough and have a deeper understanding of the disability community and policy, perhaps I can make a dent in some of those unfortunate challenges and barriers. So that's what I've kind of been up to the last 20 years.
Well, you're definitely making a dent. And, something you had said earlier too, as someone who grew up with one hand and a little older than yourself, yeah, places like Ability 360 didn't exist. And that's why I find it so fascinating and important to tell these stories. One of the things we talked about uh, before we hit record on this podcast was a lot of people think of Ability 360 within the local area of more of a facility for sports, but there is so much more to what you do. And as I look, home care. You're in several counties statewide. You have the independent living programs. Talk about some of the great things that you're doing within Ability
Yeah.
360.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So obviously, as you mentioned, we're incredibly proud of our sports and fitness center. In fact, it's one of the only types of facilities of its kind in the country. There's unfortunately just a few others, as opposed to for them being more prevalent. But Ability 360 has been around for over 40 years, serving the disability community here in the greater Phoenix area. The Sports and Fitness Center, is a major part of what we do, but it's only been around for about 12 or 13 years.
Wow.
So yeah, it's important, I think, for folks to understand the comprehensive supports and services that we provide to folks with disabilities, and that's across the spectrum of disabilities. So, one of the interesting things I find about Ability 360 is the fact, well, comparatively to other disability organizations, is we represent people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, mental illness, physical disabilities. So we represent folks across the spectrum of disabilities as opposed to other non-disability related nonprofits, of which that do really great work, but may focus on folks with Down syndrome or may focus specifically on folks with autism or specifically folks with mental illness. We represent all disabilities, which really provides us an opportunity to do some really creative and diverse things. So as you mentioned, our home care program, that's actually our largest program. We have over 1,500 home care workers out in the community, helping people with daily living skills, helping them get out of bed, take showers, get ready to go to work, all for the purposes of making sure that those individuals can be as independent as possible in the community, as opposed to having to reside in more congregate type settings like assisted living, nursing homes, group homes, and things of that nature.
You not only help with those areas to say you put your money where your mouth is, you employ, I think it's over 51% is the goal of people with disabilities at your own organization. How is that helping represent all of the communities and how is that working for Ability 360?
Yeah, Mike. So I think you bring up another really interesting differentiating factor about Ability 360 comparatively to other disability related organizations. And that is that we are actually mandated in our bylaws and in order to get some of our federal funding to employ at least 51% of our staff are individuals with disabilities. And in fact, our board of directors, who provides governance and oversight of the organization, also has to be 51% of those members are individuals with disabilities. And I think that what that does is it really keeps you, the organization, in terms of what we provide, as close to those that we serve as possible.
Now, I know within your facility, you've also, if I'm not mistaken, trained some Paralympians. It's an amazing facility. It really is. I'm Ability 360 says it all. You do more than just the sports, but that facility is state of the art. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we're so incredibly proud about our sports and fitness center. This has been in existence for just over 10 years, about 11, 12 years. And it's such an incredible place for the community to come together, both individuals with disabilities and without disabilities, to come together, exercise, be part of different types of sports and recreation in an inclusive and comfortable environment. Now, as you mentioned, it is an incredible place for people with disabilities to come, and it was built with people with disabilities in mind, making sure that anybody, no matter their ability, can come and exercise and be part of the community. But that doesn't mean that it's exclusively for people with disabilities. We want to make sure that we are always creating as inclusive as an environment as possible. One of the neat things about it there, Mike, is we see everybody from, just folks that want to come in, maybe, do some laps around the pool or maybe take a couple, walking laps up on the track, all the way up to Paralympians from all over the world come and train there. So it makes it really, really special. The only disappointing thing I think about that entire program is the fact that they don't exist more prevalently across the United States. But I think as people get to know the Sports and Fitness Center and all the incredible community that it creates and what it can do, we're getting, interest from all over the country, folks coming to us saying, "Hey, we really, really believe in the Sports and Fitness Center. How can we replicate that in other places?" So, we're hopeful that these types of facilities sprout up all over the country so more people with disabilities can enjoy that type of recreation, that kind of fitness, and those types of sports.
Well, not only are you helping others create their own recreation area, you also rent yours out. How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's all kinds of tournaments going on, in any given time during the year, whether that's a wheelchair basketball tournament or wheelchair football tournament or amputee basketball tournament. And we're always open to hosting those types of events. So we rent out that facility. In fact, we rent out so many different parts of our main campus. One of the neat things, in addition to everything we're talking about, Mike, is the fact that, where our main office is, which is right across from the Sports and Fitness Center, we actually rent space out to 9 other disability related organizations.
Wow.
So we really have tried to kind of invent a one-stop shop for all information and resources here in the greater Phoenix area related to disability. So, while we do incredible work and we have a diverse array of different supports and services, from home care to sports and fitness to home modifications to advocacy to independent living skills, we can't do it all, right? So we want to partner with other organizations. So if there's a need that, a parent has or an individual with disabilities has that we don't provide, we can always refer them to one of the other incredible disability related organizations right here within our main campus.
Yeah, I was able to volunteer for Camp No Limits at your facility a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, and that's where I really got to admire your facility from a different side, and it was fantastic. And I have to say, they asked me to do you have one of the greatest walls, the climbing walls,
Oh
and
yeah, that
they
thing is
asked me to do it.
really
And
cool.
wasn't so concerned about having one hand. I was more concerned with my age, but I was able to do it. And what a great facility! You also have a golf program where you have special golf carts to help people golf and enjoy that great game. How is that going for you?
Yeah, so we try and get as many different types of sports and recreation possible, not the least of which is our golfing program. So we're fortunate to have adaptive golf equipment that helps individuals golf that may be wheelchair users, that may have limited use of their appendages and things like that. Again, we try to create an environment where no matter your ability, no matter your particular disability, you're able to participate alongside anybody else.
Yeah.
So that's just another, I think, great example of a sport that one might think, if you have a certain type of disability, that's just off limits to you. Well, that's not the case. We try and combine, architecture and design and technology to make sure anybody can participate in any type of sport that we have here.
You said something too earlier about advocacy. That's something that's important, I think, to myself, to you, to a lot of people within the community. What does that mean for you and Ability 360? What are you looking forward to as you move forward?
Yeah, so I think that that goes into some of our independent living supports and services that we have here. So it's incredible. Anybody with a disability at any given time on any given day can come into our office, and so long as their goals that they want to set either maintain or increase their independence, they can sit down with a an independent living specialist, which is kind of like a case manager, and we will facilitate helping that individual achieve that particular goal. So that's, I think that in part is part of our advocacy. We're trying to teach people or provide them the skills so that they can advocate on their own behalf out in the community. And everything that we do here is about increasing independence. And then again, increasing independence in the community as opposed to, people living in more congregate type settings where we know, unfortunately, situations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation are much more prevalent than being in the community. Not to mention being in the community alongside everybody else is just much, much, better in terms of quality of life.
And what are you looking forward to in the future? Let's say 5 years down the road with Ability 360. What are some of the things you're working towards?
Yeah, there's always room for growth.
Yeah.
We're always, looking for different types of collaboration. I think it's a testament to the organization's longevity and just stellar reputation that we get a lot of opportunities from other organizations or from state, our local, our national, our federal government. In addition to that, I think youth, we're always trying to interact and get more involved with youth with disabilities. We use our sports and fitness center for that. We have another incredible program that works with different schools, wherein we bring in students with disabilities ages 14 to 22 and provide them with different trainings, pre-employment type training. So,
Wow.
kind of job readiness things, how to build a resume, finding their interests so that when they do get to that point where, education finishes, it's not just kind of a cliff that unfortunately we've seen in many other circumstances, but there's something that they can move on to, whether it's employment or post-secondary education. But by that point, they've been given the skills
Yeah.
and provided the kind of understanding of what they are most interested in doing next. So that's another area that we're always trying to kind of increase. Another program that's really, really cool here is our home modification program that we want to try and grow. So this, we do over $1 million worth of home modifications, typically for lower socioeconomic individuals with disabilities. So these are folks that perhaps, unfortunately have encountered some type of disability, maybe a car accident, unfortunately, or a stroke, and now they're having issues navigating their own home and might be vulnerable to having to go into a nursing home or assisted living, all because of, there's some steps, to get into their front door, or they need a roll-in shower. Now, these things can be very costly. Unfortunately, we're provided with some funds that we can go in there, assess the situation, contract that work out, and in most circumstances, it's all completely paid for. So we do, like I said, roll-in showers, we can do ramps, we can do grab bars, things like that, which again can completely change an individual's life by being able to navigate their own home as opposed to having to, stay in rehabilitative hospitals or assisted living and things like that. So that's another program that we're really interested in growing and seeing where we can take it. So, the sky's the limit. There's so many different opportunities and always, different needs. Housing is a huge need that we're trying to figure out. It's across the entire valley. But one of the neat things that we try and maintain, and it goes back to what you talked about, Mike, having 51% of our staff be people with disabilities. We're always checking in. We always want to know what the community needs are. So we do that through social media, surveys, community involvement, just getting out there and mixing it up with
Yeah.
folks to make sure that what we're investing our time and funds in are actually reflective of the needs of that community. So when you say what's the next thing, who knows? It depends what the greatest need is.
It was a loaded question, but you definitely have a plan. And again, I like that it's all about the 360-degree view of the person. And what a great name for your organization because it really kind of shows that. Chris, thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast. But I do want to remind people I'm going to have links to everything we talked about to your website. But I will say for the people that don't read the description, it's ability360.org. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mike. Absolutely.
Go to their website, support them, go to all the social media, follow them, like them, do everything you can. And Chris, thank you so much again for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
That was the We're Not Stumped podcast, hosted by Mike Bolland. If you want to be a guest on the program, reach out to Mike at his email address, mike@mikeboland.com. This podcast is produced by One Hand Man Productions. If you are looking to start your podcast, go to onehandmanproductions.com.